Well, this is very exciting. This was the hard work was done by Stephen and Will really for this in conjunction with Janine. So I did all of the easy bit was just having the idea, and then I pushed it out to these guys to organise it. So I can't possibly take all the credit for this. So I'm just going to talk you through my business, Trend Bible, and try and explain to you the process of trend forecasting, the trend forecasting industry, and try and help you understand a little bit more about that. And then I'm going to run through a few trends that are actually important for the rest of this year and into next year. So what do we do at Trend Bible? We forecast future trends. We look at consumer behaviour, and we help retailers and brands build commercially successful product ranges across a number of different disciplines, so fashion, home interiors, beauty, food and consumer electronics. We have a main focus on home interiors. That's really our core focus. Trend forecasting isn't unpredictable. There are a few things that govern change and that influence consumers' taste and what they like to buy. Why bother? I think this image really demonstrates why bother trend forecasting with what happened to Woolworths and lots of other brands through 2008, 2009 and last year too. So we've actually seen lots of brands and retailers become casualties of the recession. Brands that didn't look far enough ahead, they didn't listen to their customers, they weren't prepared to change, and they weren't responsive enough. Trying to shape a picture of what the future will look like is essential to stay ahead. So this is part of trying to understand what the customer wants, how they behave, and how they will behave up to kind of 2 years ahead. There are some companies that forecast trends up to 10 and 20 years ahead. We help brands envisage this picture of the future, evidencing what the future concerns of consumers will be and helping our clients develop ranges that reflect these needs. Some of the customers that I work with are kind of big blue chip corporate companies. You have to provide evidence for those kind of companies that something is going to be a trend. I can't just decide that I like pink or I like a particular shape and I'm going to make that thing happen. It's actually about providing evidence for a lot of these brands that something's going to be big news. So how do we do it? Well, we spend our time researching, monitoring, and critically analysing trend information. We don't just forecast a trend and put it out there and say, right, that's it, our work is done. We monitor that trend, we see how it develops. Sometimes there are little mini trends that might come off a big theme that's happening, for example. We compare this kind of critical evaluation of information with creative ideas, partly sparked by travel to global trade shows and to graduate events and design shows. We also go to things like quirky craft fairs. We do the Parisian flea markets. And we also have this fantastic network of what I call unusual and interesting thinkers, which makes them all sound really odd, but they are genuinely interesting people who have different backgrounds in journalism, design, art, all sorts of different things. And they meet with me twice a year and we sit down and figure out what we think are the key overall directions that will affect consumers up to 2 years ahead. All of our trend directions, so whether they're design or shape or pattern or colour directions, we underpin these with social information, cultural information. So if there's a particular film, for example, or a particular genre of films that is important, we think that will affect trends. And it's my job to decide when that affects trends. Some of my customers will actually say to me, well, you said there would be a kind of mystical escapism theme happening and that people want to escape from the reality of the recession. When will that happen? What month will it happen? At what point do I put my kind of, my duvet cover, which has, wizards and witches on it, into my store? So it's that specific. We have to actually help our customer figure out how those social themes and how a film like Harry Potter might influence something that's going to happen in 2 years' time. We also look at things like blogs, we look at journals, newspapers, and we collate and collect all of this information to help us judge what we think will be the social mood. And then we filter this through into workable trends for each of our clients. We have trend forecasting manuals that we sell, which are kind of a standard book that people can buy and interpret themselves. or we work with our clients on bespoke projects where we can actually tailor the trends to their brand, because we don't believe in this kind of blanket approach to trends where everybody should do red or everybody should do a particular design theme. There are things that will apply for a particular company, and it's really important to us that we try and find a way to refresh people's core ranges that sell regularly for them with up-to-date trends. This page just shows some of the brands that we work with. Again, some of those buy our trend forecasting books from us. We have agents at the moment in 15 different countries. We're about to expand into a further 16 countries at the end of this month, which is fantastic. And others we work with on a consultancy basis, mostly in the US and the UK. So does it work? This is the big question. This is probably the most important slide in the presentation when I work with my clients. This is an example. On the left-hand side there, you can see a page for a theme that we developed for the supermarket Tesco. We did all of their food, fashion and home interior forecasting over a 5-year period. And we now still work just on the home interior side of things. So we developed a theme that we called Midnight Garden, and we developed colour palettes and showed them the print and pattern directions. And you can see on the right-hand side, we went in store when this look hit down in their shops, and we photographed everything. And you can see that it influenced everything from stationery through to glassware, tableware, bed linen. And in terms of figures, obviously, they're very guarded in terms of how much impact you can have, as all clients would be. But this is basically what happened to them that year. They hit a record 3 billion profits in 2009, which was the most that any British company had achieved. They had an 8% increase in non-food sales, and more specifically had double-digit growth on the home interior range. So this is a great example of just showing how we start out and what actually happens with the product. So the trend forecasting industry, it's seen very much as a very mystical behind-the-scenes activity. Lots of trend forecasters are very secretive about how they gather information and how they forecast trends. And really, my perspective is that I know that trends can help sell products. They can help generate press for brands. And I know that they can seem very complex and very intricate, but actually it's quite a straightforward process. And part of my job is to try and demystify the process, really. There are some logos on the right-hand side here of other trend forecasting agencies, some of which are huge multinational corporations, some of which are smaller operations that are more similar to Trend Bible. So retailers and brands understand that forecasting the social mood and predicting consumer behaviour does have benefits. And if they're able to anticipate this, then obviously they can get a good step ahead. I think there are around sort of 30 other trend forecasting agencies in and around, well, globally. About 5 or 6 of those are based in London. A majority of them are based in Paris and some are based in New York. Only one in Newcastle. So trend forecasting, it's scientific. It's something it can be measured, it can be researched, you can prove that it exists. It's about experience, so you can learn from experience as to whether something's going to work in a particular country or whether something's going to work at a particular market level, for example. And it's also instinctive, and the instinct word is kind of the word that I always worry about when I'm presenting this to my corporate clients, because that suggests that it's something that's intrinsically linked to the individual, and sometimes it very much is. I've had situations where I've told a client that I think red shoes are going to be big for a particular season without having any evidence to suggest that that is the case, and the client has just said, well, you can't prove it to me, so we're not going to do it. And lo and behold, 12 months later, red shoes were everywhere else on the high street, yet there was nothing specific to suggest that they would be the big seller. So sometimes it can be instinctive, but that's also where the experience side comes into it as well. So why should you be trend aware? Trend forecasting should be part of your job if you work in the design industry. It's important to consider how your customer base thinks, feels and shops in order that you can sell them appropriate products at the appropriate time and in the appropriate manner. In times of economic instability, it's more important than ever that we forecast accurate, well-informed trends. And in design, it's essential that you have a knowledge of consumer trends so that you can maximise your opportunities and shape your ideas to fit the social mood. So there's always a way of trying to tie it, whether it's through PR and communication. It doesn't have to be about the product that you're selling, but you should be able to tap into a social mood that's happening that will help you shift that product. So where should you look? The type of things that we look at everyday news, and we try and figure out whether something's just a one-off story or whether it's part of a bigger picture. We go to art and design exhibitions, we look at new technologies, we look at things like the NASA website because we know that they do lots of research For example, they're researching the effects of computer games on children at the moment, and we think that's a really interesting area of research. So you can learn lots from some of those websites. Things like inspirational brands, designers and individuals, ideas have to start somewhere, and quite often there's a trickle-down process. So it's always good to be aware of those kind of niche individuals that are doing something different, because often those things filter through. And also alternative industries. So I look a lot at the food industry because it's very responsive to change. It moves very quickly, and a lot of the strategies developed for the food industry get borrowed by fashion companies and interior companies. So what influences trends? I actually stole this concept from an author called Malcolm Gladwell, who's really worth looking up if you get the chance. And he describes 3 groups of people that he thinks are responsible for the development of trends. And at the very top, he describes a very small percentage of people who he describes as mavens. And they actually take on board new ideas. They create things. They're very, very niche in terms of a group. But they are the top of the influencing sort of tree, if you like. Then you've got the next bracket down, which is a slightly bigger group, which are called early adopters, who are the first people to pick up on trends and move them forward. And then the last bit, which I spend a lot of my time obsessed with, the late majority, and what makes something go from a tiny trickle of a trend into this massive explosion, which is obviously called the late majority there. So that just gives you an idea in terms of how people move trends. The second thing that I think is worth noting is that we're living in a society really where we're more value-based than we've ever been before. We can have someone who's 11 having the same interests as somebody who's 90 years old, and that's never really happened before, and it's something that's come about with the internet and new social groupings. Things have really, really changed. We've done lots of different types of research and studies on this whole concept. And just the images that I've chosen here on the left-hand side, this lady is 80 years old and she's a model. The girl in the centre is called Tavi, and she's 13 years old, and she's been sitting on the front rows of the catwalks in Paris and New York and Milan since she was 11 years old. And apparently the whole fashion industry is completely terrified of her. And on the right-hand side, we've obviously got Madonna, who's in her 50s, who looks like a teenager on there. So you've got this kind of blend of influences and blend of age groups, interests, tastes, and values that really start to shake up the way that we've thought about selling things. So what impacts trends for 2011? I just wanted to take you through a couple of things that we're thinking about. Patriotism is really high on the agenda for 2011 and 2012, and has been quite a big thing for 2010 as well. But we've got obviously the Royal Wedding coming up, and we've got the Diamond Jubilee and the London Olympics happening in 2012. So we expect that this patriotism is still going to be really big news. Linked through to that is this concept for locally sourced products, British made, British crafted textiles and ceramics that have a new credibility. The word craft, for example, if you'd used the word craft in a trend presentation 5 years ago, people would just never have paid any attention. The word craft has a new authority that comes along with it, really. So there's a new focus on British icons, new and old, from street party nostalgia through to things like the Glastonbury Festival. The second theme that we're looking at for 2011 is craftsmanship, as I've just mentioned. So with the globalisation of brands and this kind of cookie-cutter homogenisation of the high street over the past decade, consumers begin to grow bored of the pile 'em high, sell 'em cheap strategy and seek out genuine value. The new appreciation of craft ties in with our obsession for all things British. Our third story we've called Standing Still, and this really is a reflection on people's behaviour following the recession. Unsure of what the future may hold, the consumer remains understandably cautious. There's a fear of making bold decisions and taking risks, with consumers taking comfort in standing still and even looking back to times that remind us of simpler, less complex lives. It's not only the British who are obsessing over looking back. This photograph, for example, was taken at the Ace Hotel in New York, and it's an example of this kind of new nostalgia, and it takes its cues from low-key 19th century bars and saloons. So even the most cutting edge of design and architecture at the moment has this real nostalgia and comfort factor attached to it. In pursuit of happiness, products and experiences that make us smile are important. So again, this links back to the emotions that people feel because of the recession. There's lots of evidence to suggest that people are spending more time at home, they're eating out less, for example. So there's this whole concept of trying to surround themselves with products that make them smile and make them feel happy. Overloaded with the responsibility of critiquing our finances and behaviours, we strive to break free from the shackles of living sensibly. So there's a greater value on personal happiness, for example. So this is an example of what we would do with that trend. So the last one, for example, there was the in pursuit of happiness. I've talked about nostalgia and craftsmanship. This was a theme that we did for Spring/Summer 2011. So we developed this trend 2 years ago. We called it Voyager, and we've obviously used the iconic Mini on there. And these textiles on the right-hand side were designed by a girl who had taken inspiration from the British Transport Museum, from all of the kind of upholstery fabrics there. This just describes really the type of theme that we picked. So it was about the golden age of travel. We obviously went to the British Transport Museum. We looked at adventure literature, for example, which we felt was very important. Things like maps and all sorts of references to do with kind of vintage techniques and things like that for textiles. This was the colour palette that we developed. So we took vintage maps and stamp collections as inspiration for that. And you can see here, this is a range of products by Jamie Oliver, and you can see really how these trends start to filter through. Anything here that looks vintage or handcrafted, it looks, I'm sure Jamie Oliver did not stand there and write in pencil on every single bottle that's there, but that's the suggestion with something like this when you pick it up off the shelf. And again, through to products here. So the right-hand side, this is a fabric from the latest Liberty collection, and then you can see how maps have been used through lots of different products. Witty retro tableware, so some of these royal and regal references coming through, and recycled tableware. And finally, I just wanted to leave you with my top 5 tips for trend spotting. Number 1 is to sign up for Google Alerts. I don't know if any of you guys use this, but it's really worth doing. They enable you to get a daily, weekly or monthly search on a specific phrase. So if there's something that you should be aware of or you want to be more aware of, I sometimes type in my competitors' names and do searches on them so I can see what they're all up to and spy on them. But it's a really great way to kind of pick up on key trends. The second one is that innovation happens in all industries, so keep an eye on technology, things like we look at industrial fabric development, for example, food, travel, and see if there are any trends which could cross over or any strategies that you could borrow to apply to your products or your industry. The third one is simply blogs. I mean, we just get so much information. We trawl blogs day in, day out. It's a great way of starting to see trends emerge. Number 4, read into everything. I put an example here about a cut in car manufacture because that's what was happening at the time of this. But you have to think about what does that actually mean? What will that mean for the average person? What does it mean for my customer? Is there a way that I can use this information to build a trend and appeal to my customer all the more? And the last but not least thing is instinct. It's the secret weapon when it comes to trend forecasting. If you have a feeling for something, do your research. Chances are that other people are starting to follow the same thread of an idea, and that could be a sign that it's going to be big. That is my presentation. I think I've just put my website on the end there. We're all on the social networking thing, Twitter, Facebook and everything, so please feel free to have a look, and you'll see our blog on there as well. Thank you very much.